Aladrovic, then to Commissioner Schmit, and then to Jordi Karel Gotter from ELA. Each of you will have 4 minutes for the presentation. And our first speaker, please. Mr. Aladrovic.
For the beginning, good afternoon from Zagreb, Croatia. Esteemed Chairwoman, Madam Durish Nikolsonova, Commissioner Schmit, distinguished members of the committee, Mr. Kurel. It is a great honor for me to be invited to this hearing today and a pleasure to contribute to this timely debate on an important topic of seasonal and cross-border workers in the context of COVID-19 pandemic. European society has been significantly affected by COVID-19. Confinement and social distancing measures were necessary to protect the Union's population and healthcare systems. While necessary, these measures also had a substantial negative effect on the European economy, especially on the small and medium-sized enterprises and workers in non-standard forms of work. Today, we can see that the public health aspects of the pandemic are weakening. Nevertheless, the economic and social difficulties remain intense. Since the beginning of the crisis, Member States have implemented a large variety of measures to mitigate and prevent severe economic repercussions. They have also taken action to deal with the consequences of the pandemic on labour markets and welfare systems. In retrospect, our measures have helped to cushion the first impact of the crisis, and we avoided immediate and severe consequences such as mass layoffs. The employment and social policy ministers had the opportunity to share their views on this matter in a video conference of 5th of May. The very stimulating and productive discussion led to many interesting observations. Ministers underlined that ensuring a quick economic recovery, strategies should be built on a coordinated approach, safeguarding employment, supporting businesses, and protecting groups in need. It is worth highlighting that they consider seasonal and cross-border workers to be essential for many economic sectors, such as agriculture and tourism, and to have a vital role to play with the economic recovery. Temporary closure of internal borders was considered by many member states as an indispensable measure to control and limit the spread of the COVID-19. Ministers expressed the opinion that opening the internal borders is key for many workers and enterprises, and that seasonal and cross-border workers should be treated equally as domestic workers. A number of member states stressed the importance of free movement of workers and underlined the need of a speedy transposition of already existing European legislation into national law. Additionally, they expressed their red lines for an in-depth examination of ways forward at technical level. As the joint statement of the members of the European Council members from 26th of March clearly indicates, smooth border management for persons and goods should be ensured in order to preserve the functioning of the single market. Steps are already being taken in this direction. While some member states have already lifted all travel restrictions for cross-border workers, others have committed to do so as soon as possible. National authorities are in close contact, cooperating together in order to find efficient and easy applicable solutions, which allows for safe cross-border labor mobility. Restoring efficient movement for cross-border workers is only one aspect of the issue. The second, equally important, is securing safe working conditions and timely informing of workers about the changes and new procedures, accompanied with appropriate training if necessary. Let me also remind you that the Member States are deeply committed to ensuring access of all citizens in cross-border situations to adequate social security. For more than 1 year, the Council and the European Parliament have been engaged in a long and complex negotiations to revise two regulations on the coordination of the social security systems. Technically and politically, this is not an easy file. However, finding a balanced solution requires additional efforts and flexibility from all actors. Free movement of workers is one of the fundamental principles of the EU, and it ensures supply and demand of workforce across the Union. For European economies to recover, we must enable its application in full capacity while also ensuring safety of workers. Thank you for your attention.
Thank you very much. And now we'll hear from Commissioner Schmit on the current situation of cross-border and seasonal workers. Mr. Schmit, please.
Monsieur Schmit, pourriez-vous appuyer sur le bouton speak?
Mr. Schmit, could you please press the speak button?
I'm sorry. So I restart, sorry. Free movement of workers remains one of the fundamental freedoms of the internal market. There are more than 17 million people working in a member state other than that of their nationality, and there are 1.5 million cross-border workers. The COVID-19 crisis has triggered unprecedented measures across EU member states, including checks and restrictions at the internal borders, having a direct impact on free movement of workers. To facilitate the free movement of workers, the Commission published on March 30 guidelines concerning the exercise of the free movement of workers. The goal was that frontier workers, but also posted and seasonal workers exercising critical occupations should have an unhampered access to their workplace. We continue monitoring that the measures adopted by the Member States are necessary, proportionate and non-discriminatory. The joint European roadmap towards lifting COVID-19 containment measures confirmed that the gradual removal of restrictions to free movement and reopening of borders should give priority to cross-border and seasonal workers and should avoid any discrimination. Furthermore, guidance published on 13th of May as part of the tourism package included a common approach to restoring free movement and lifting restrictions at EU internal borders in a gradual and coordinated way. Those are concrete actions of the Commission that follow also the lines from the Parliament's resolution on the EU coordinated action to combat the COVID-19 pandemic and its consequences. The principle of equal treatment of EU mobile workers with national workers is enshrined in Article 45 of the Treaty. It ensures the best protection to EU mobile workers, including for frontier and seasonal workers. We should, of course, not forget the importance of properly applying national labour law to these workers who are entitled to equal treatment. To better monitor the respect of the principle of equal treatment, the Commission explored with EU Ministers of Employment and Social Affairs how the applicable border regime in their country complies with the Commission's guidelines on free movement and what measures were taken to ensure the protection of seasonal workers. I have sent to all ministers in this respect a formal letter, and we discussed the matter, as it was already mentioned, the matter during the EBSCO video conference on the 5th of May. That being said, frontier and seasonal workers still face challenges which we need to address, as the past months have made more visible certain sectors of the economy, and in particular the agricultural sector, require the additional support of the seasonal workers from other member states. The Commission asked member states to exchange information and establish specific procedures to ensure a smooth passage for such workers in order to respond to labour shortages as a result of the crisis. The EURES placement activities were also severely affected by the closure of internal borders. After the lifting of the restriction, EURES will continue to cover needs of its beneficiaries, including frontier and seasonal workers. Both the platform of the EURES European Coordination Office will be transferred to the European Labour Authority in the near future. Once fully operational, ELA shall assist Member States and the Commission in their effective application and enforcement of Union law related to labour mobility. The EU rules on social security coordination offer considerable flexibility to assist mobile workers. To ensure further clarity regarding the elements related to social security, the Commission published a fact sheet of questions and answers, including information for the attention of frontier workers and posted workers affected by the restrictions on free movement of people being imposed by a number of EU member states as a result of COVID-19. Consultations are also currently ongoing with the Administrative Commission to find solutions to practical issues. The Commission is also committed to finalise, as soon as possible, the ongoing revision of social security coordination rules. This revision will ensure that mobile workers affected by the crisis, and notably the border closures, can rely on a well-functioning social security coordination. Health and safety, ensuring health and safety of the workers, especially of those performing vital tasks, such as making sure that we have food on our plates, is our shared responsibility. Under EU law, mobile and seasonal workers have the right to equal treatment with national workers regarding any conditions of work and employment. And I welcome the joint declaration agreed by social partners in agriculture to protect seasonal workers, as well as the commitments taken by the German Labour Minister on working conditions of seasonal workers in slaughterhouses. Legislation on health and safety at work applies to all workers independently of their nationality. The employers must assess all possible risks at work, including new ones, and to put in place adequate preventive and protective measures. Employers are also obliged to provide workers with related information as well as protective equipment or hygiene products when necessary. The EU has taken numerous steps to support Member States in this regard, and the Commission is preparing clear guidelines on this important topic. EU OSHA, European Agency for Health and Safety at Work, published guidance addressing COVID-19 at the workplace as well as the return to work. These guidance documents assist employers in dealing with health and safety aspects at work. They also refer to relevant national guidance for specific sectors and occupations, including seasonal work. Thank you.
Thank you so much, Commissioner. Now we will hear from the Executive Director of ELA, Mr. Karel, about the situation of cross-border workers, seasonal workers, etc. And I hope he can provide us with some data on this issue. Mr. Karel, the floor is yours.
Thank you very much, Madam Chair and Minister, Commissioner. I would first of all like to thank the Employment Committee for organizing this hearing and for inviting me to participate. As you know, the European Labour Authority, for which I am the interim Executive Director, is committed to become a key player in helping strengthen fair labour mobility. It will do so by assisting Member States and the Commission in their effective application and enforcement of Union law within its scope. I do agree with your view on the need to tackle issues affecting the free movement of workers in a coordinated manner and pooling the efforts that each of our institutions and bodies can contribute with. As the Commissioner said, there are many cooperation structures on European level which facilitate the dialogue between Member States' different authorities. These have provided valuable work so far, and I have no doubt that they will continue to do so in the future. ELA can and does complement this work in full and strict respect of, first of all, the mandate given by its regulation, by definition, and also, on the other hand, within the remit of its current operational capacity as it stands today. While ELA will support Member States in their enforcement efforts in cross-border situations, it is, at the end of the day, and we have to face that, the responsibility of the national authorities to ensure the application of the EU and national legislation that the Commissioner referred to before. Concerning the scope of the work of ELA, our founding regulation, adopted by Parliament and Council, clearly defines our remit as including free movement of workers, posting of workers, social security coordination, and social aspects of international road transport rules. It concerns, therefore, ELA can only tackle these kind of issues and cannot directly tackle situations related with working conditions and occupation, health and safety legislation. On this, of course, we will cooperate with the relevant national and EU institutions and bodies. It is motivating to see that so many of you look to ELA in these challenging times for EU labour mobility. We should nevertheless keep in mind that ELA is not yet 1 year old. I know that this is a long time when it comes to the political life of an institution, but when it comes to its administrative life, a year is not that much time. And we are still in the building up phases with a team of over 20 people and working very hard on two main priorities out of the 7 tasks that the regulation entrusts to the authority. First of all, ELA is focusing on facilitating the provision of information. This is, of course, always important, but even more so in these times where the COVID is affecting the lives of everybody, and as we said, particularly of cross-border workers, posted workers, and seasonal workers, in order to have up-to-date information. And in this respect, on its website, ELA provides direct information on the Commission's guidance on different aspects of labour mobility and social security coordination that the Commissioner mentioned before. Moreover, we have established a working group with representatives of all Member States, which is meeting right now at this very moment, where we have experts from national administrations, as I said, social partners, fundamental, and of course also the European Parliament expert, Mr. Jan Kremers, and they are now exchanging best practices on communicating to cross-border workers about the measures that have been adopted right now as a response to the COVID crisis. As I said, access to this information is vital in order to be able to exercise the right to free movement. ELA will also look and support the translation of relevant pages of national websites into other languages in order to help addressing the gap of information that cross-border workers and employers sometimes feel. And finally, ELA will see at the end, after the summer, the arrival of its national liaison officers, and which will be a fundamental element, we believe, in improving information and cooperation between national administrations. Beyond better information, we also need better enforcement. And that's why the second priority that ELA is looking at and it's working on is precisely about joint inspections. These cross-border concerted and joint labour inspections, which are even more needed now, have been made difficult given the current travel limitations as well as the safety and health requirements of labour inspectors. They are all confronted to that kind of problems. That's why ELA, with the national experts of its working group, also on joint and concerted inspections, is currently assessing the extent of the impact of COVID-19 on cross-border activities. It is also discussing possible adaptation measures, for example, focusing in the short term on concerted cross-border inspections, concerted meaning that they happen at the same time in 2 member states, so they don't require cross-border work, which can also benefit from ELA's support. And I would like to say here that you all know that the last week of March should have been the EU Week for Fair Work, and ELA had already scheduled the first...
Mr. Courel, I'm sorry, I need to interrupt you. I'm sorry. May I kindly ask you to speed down your reading, because it's very difficult for the interpreters.
Of the crisis. What can we do in the future? I think that it's very important that will be growing up and being up to speed, it will bring even more added value. And as I said before, we believe that the national liaison officers will become a key factor of the success of this authority, both because they will be able to provide better information, but even more importantly, because we believe that they will be able to enhance day-to-day cooperation between national administration. So I would like to stop here, and I would like to thank you again for your invitation.
Okay, thank you for your contributions to the Minister, the Commissioner, and to the Executive Director of the ELA. I hope people who were depending on the translation could work from that, because the interpreters were complaining about a too high speed of talking. So let's see. And with an eye on the clock, I think I'm going to do the first and the second round of questions at the same time, and then come back to our three speakers and see if we will be able to finish this meeting at 4. And in the first round of speakers, the first one to give the floor would be Ms. Cindy Fransen, she's not?
Yes.
Yes, she is. Okay, thank you. Cindy, 2 minutes, please.
Thank you, Chair, dear colleagues, and thank you also to the speakers for joining us. My first question is a question for Mr. Corral. Yesterday, during a webinar of the German Confederation of Trade Unions, the example of the Belgium National Social Security Office has shown that digitizing the application process to issue A1 documents could be an effective instrument in the fight against undeclared work and social security abuse. 80% of the forms are issued within 1 day. However, the Belgium office mentioned that the biggest challenges are the different systems in the member states and the difficult slow communication with some of the other member states. So therefore, I want to ask what initiatives the ELA will take into the future to coordinate the different application processes and to improve the exchange of information between the member states to ensure a proper social protection for all employees in the European Union. And my second question is a question for the Croatian minister. In line with the European Pillar of Social Rights, the Croatian presidency announced in its priorities to proceed with the economy of well-being, to put people and their well-being at the center of policy and decision making. The current presidency promised to initiate discussions that place an emphasis on flexibility of work, work-life balance and well-being at work, which are all very relevant topics during the current COVID pandemic, and especially for workers in vulnerable positions. Could you give me an overview of the initiatives and results so far? Thank you.
Thank you, Mrs. Fransen. Now I give the floor to myself, which is always easy. Huh? And let me start by saying, first of all, I'd like to thank the Commission for its guidelines on the cross-border workers and on the promise to keep track on the situation. And I think there is every reason to be very concerned. I think the business model of temporary agencies is exposed during this corona crisis. They hardly take any responsibility for cross-border workers who work for them. And I know myself from numerous stories about people who lost their housing together with their jobs. And at the German-Dutch border, dozens of workers in the meat industry got coronavirus. And they continuously worked with different colleagues and were not protected at all. Some of these workers cannot be found now in Germany, so it's clear that they got corona, but they seems to be under the radar. They cannot be found in Germany, they cannot be found in the Netherlands, they cannot be found elsewhere in Europe. because the temporary agency don't take care of those people they work with if they have already left. So my first question would be, does the Commission agree that more is needed? And what would the Commission recommend to guarantee those cross-border workers a maximum of protection and access to social security? Will the Commission come up with more stringent measures for temporary agencies to make sure that all workers, also the cross-border workers, can work safely? And in addition, I hope that the ELA, the European Labour Authority, will do everything within its mandate and perhaps even a little bit more to make sure that cross-border workers can do their work safely. In practice, real free movement of workers is only possible if the workplace is safe. So what steps the ELA will take to ensure measures in that direction? After me, Dragos Pislaru, on behalf of the Renew Group.
Thank you very much, Chair. And thank you very much for the support in organizing this debate. Renew Europe believes that this topic is a very relevant topic we can debate in the ample committee, and we were keen on initiating this particular hearing. We are talking about citizens that are affected right now during the crisis, but this is actually something that the crisis only highlights. We have an issue of vulnerability that actually is for years there, and we have not acted upon it. Thank you very much, Minister Aladrovic, for being here. Thank you very much, dear Commissioner, dear Director Kurel. This debate should actually be the beginning of real action, and I'm sure that together, the Parliament, the Council, the Commission, and the European Labour Authority will have the means to change the situation. And I say that because we need to change things rapidly. Indeed, we need to change the situation in which was Nicolas Baham, 57 years old, when he was actually found dead of COVID-19 in the container he shared with other Asparagus speakers from Romania, having received no medical attention whatsoever in Germany. The same thing is happening right now in the abattoirs of the Netherlands or Germany, where hundreds of confirmed COVID-19 cases weekly among the cross-border workers there. For Maria Jelenova, 48 years old, that she works as a care worker in Austria, along with many other workers that are actually cross-border from Slovakia to Austria. This is also an issue of protection that she's not actually receiving, be that healthcare or social protection, or that we are talking about sanitary measures. So what are the actions that the Council and the Commission are doing to prevent such cases? And the list of problems is long and difficult, and indeed, as Commissioner Schmit mentioned, we need to have actions that are necessary, and I think that we are clear that are necessary, proportional, and we are here talking about the statistics that is showing that we are having actually 1.9 million posted workers around Europe and 1.5 million cross-border workers. This is thanks to the European Parliament Research Service, and I would like to thank them for these figures. So indeed, we need to be very, very clear on that. And then how are we going to unblock the Regulation 883 and finally deliver to our citizens? This is something that we should do together, the Parliament and the Council, and this should be a top priority for everyone. I've been asked about the responsibility. Who is responsible for the situation? I mean, first of all, obviously, the employers need to be more responsible when they are hiring and avoiding practices of abuse. But then the member states need to actually go there and intervene with much more determination. And then, obviously, we have the community level with ELA, which we understand that it's actually right now more or less at the beginning of the work, but we need actually to enhance and accelerate it, and the European Parliament would actually be there for the acceleration of ELA. Thank you very much, and I hope that we can really have across political support on this particular topic of protecting seasonal workers. Thank you.
Thank you, colleague. Now I give the floor to Guido Ruyl on behalf of the ID Group.
Frau Vorsitzende, Herr Madam Chairman, Minister, Commissioner, we're experiencing a massive crisis that demands a great deal of all of us, and we are responsible to form the future, to draw lessons from this. The good thing about this crisis is that they've shown to our faces very real problems that maybe we didn't want to see. One of these problems, for example, It concerns the working conditions in many areas of society, including cases where COVID crises have come to light in the slaughter and meat industries. Now, the slavery-type conditions that people are experiencing there, where 16-hour working day is not unusual, and where the working conditions are like slavery as well. And then the conditions where these people live in also are terrible, sometimes 8 people living to one room. My party has always been against free movement of people from Romania and Bulgaria. This free movement leads to dumping of wages, first of all, and then to modern slavery in the midst of our Europe. The second point that we've been taught by COVID-19 is the importance of our health services and healthcare services that we all appreciate. When we talk about healthcare services, I can speak from first-hand experience because my wife works in this sector. My wife in Germany, as a professional, gets 1,500 euros net, just a bit more than that gross. So they're not experiencing any appreciation for the massive job of work that they're doing, and it cannot be the solution of politics just to get more help from Eastern Europeans to do that work instead. Now, without the hard workers from Eastern Europe, the German health system would collapse, but that shouldn't be the way things are. These highly educated nursing staff are needed in their countries as well. Another point that's very important to me, I've been looking after the homeless for many years now, and homeless people suffer a great deal in these times. And this is really the question I'd like to put to the Commissioner. We have a lot of guest workers from the Ukraine, from Belarus, who are now working in the gastronomy sector in Poland and Italy and elsewhere. Now, at the start of the COVID-19 pandemic, it wasn't just that they were made unemployed, they were actually made homeless as well. And because many of them couldn't actually get home again to their home countries, that was a problem. So I'd like to have you bring us up to date on that.
Monir Satouri, speaking from remote participation on behalf of the Greens. Monir. Is it functioning? Yeah. Go ahead.
Madam Chair, the Minister, Commissioner, we've seen in German butcheries the way that jobs are not being kept up. Workers are not being paid properly. They're not paid Social Security. They're underpaid. And they're kept in horrible living conditions. How will you ensure to improve European legislation on employment matters? And how will you improve the working conditions for migrant and seasonal workers? These are often migrant workers who come to increase help during different seasons, and they do not have decent working conditions. These are very vulnerable groups, and yet they are key for the safety of the food chain in Europe. They do not have proper social distancing during their work, neither in their living conditions. How can the EU uphold the fundamental rights of the EU while ensuring better working conditions for these migrant workers? And how can you make sure that member states do not discriminate against these workers? Now, since the EU has limited competences when it comes to health and safety, what will you do? And we also need to uphold the democracy of our institutions. There's currently a case at the Court of Justice of the EU and so the Commission wants to continue with this case. We see a lack of respect of our institution, and I'd like to hear your thoughts on this topic. Thank you.
Satori. Next to that, colleague Rafalska, on behalf of the ECR.
Pani Przewodnicząca,
President, Commissioner, Minister, ladies and gentlemen, I haven't heard such an emotional and important debate in our committee where we agree so much. And it is only the crisis and the dramatic examples showed what has been happening with seasonal workers for quite a long time. These dramatic examples show some examples of slavery work and dramatic conditions without any guarantees. And today we need to say that we cannot postpone action anymore. I also subscribe to what the representative of ELA said, that there are no guarantees to workers that are denied basic conditions overnight. At the very beginning of the crisis, member states faced a dilemma. What is more important to curb free movement? Because, for example, in Poland, local authorities were raising voices about the fact that some workers kept crossing the border. But after a while, it turned out that these cross-border workers were denied fundamental rights. So we need to address the regulation on social security, what we should do next, about seasonal workers, cross-border workers. And I would also like to appeal that we raise the issue of the European certificate for seasonal and cross-border workers.
Thank you. And now, from remote, Nicolas Willemsen, on behalf of the GUE. Nicolas, are you there? Yes, you are.
Thank you very much. During this pandemic, one of the priorities of the EU have been to ensure free labor mobility for posted workers and seasonal workers. And I have a question concerning this, because the other day I visited a large construction site here in Copenhagen. Here the workers are facing huge problems of social dumping due to the abuse of posted workers. Basically what is going on is that Polish and Romanian colleagues at this construction site are being paid far less than their Danish colleagues and receive far less health protection, even in this dangerous pandemic. And when they try to get organized in the local trade unions in order to claim their rights, the employer fired them and sent them home to their home countries. And unfortunately, this grave incident is not an isolated incident. This is a systematic problem of social dumping that we are seeing around Europe that I think is totally unacceptable. So I would like to hear, what will you do to end the discrimination and social dumping, which is even more urgent in a time of crisis? Thank you. I look forward to your answers.
Thank you. And now the last speaker in the first round, Daniele Rondinelli, on behalf of the IDEA Group. Is she connected? She is? She has to push the speak button, perhaps? Yeah, there she is.
I should like to underscore the importance of cross-border work, labor, which means that there is a sporadic use of borders from country to country, which means that has really changed labor mobility. We could even once and for all call this a European labor market, full-fledged. Member states are trying very much to look at the economic impact of the crisis. But when we look at farming, we know that if we don't do something immediately to come up with some sort of lanes for seasonal workers, we will have a major crisis, because we know that what we need is those that can come to work in the fields, because to uphold self-sufficiency in food. So I should like to ask the Croatian minister and the commissioner what precisely could be stated today on the two major elements that I see emerge as extremely important. How can we make sure that cross-border workers can have travel and accommodation and working conditions that are congenial, whatever the type of work that they may be carrying out might be? And we also have to recognize the fact that cross-border workers are absolutely indispensable for economic growth within the European Union. That means that we need to come up with some sort of a framework for standards and rights that would be based on Regulation 883 to make sure that there is social security coordination as well, such that people can have the portability of their coverage, as well as the recognition of the social safety net in the case of a loss of a job. I think that these are some of the fundamental issues that the European Commission and the Croatian presidency could focus on as a priority during this particular period of time to be able to tackle the major issues of this crisis that we face. Thank you.
Thank you. And with an eye on the clock, I'm trying to get as many people from the second round in. So instead of giving now the word back to the three guests, I'm trying to see if Adam Kosa, he's already here, if it's possible to have your questions in the second round only in 1 minute, I would be ever so grateful, because we are losing the interpretation at a certain moment. Mr. Kosa. Mr. Kosa.
Thank you, Chair. Thank you very much for this opportunity to ask questions. Many people have made references about Eastern European, Central and Eastern European workers and the fact that they are indispensable in the agriculture of Western countries. Now the harvest in Western countries is endangered because the Eastern workers cannot get to the West. So we can see how the situation is now. We need more than ever the cooperation of the Eastern and Western member states. We would need to make the rules on posted workers fair. We should not let Eastern workers be exploited in Western member states. They should be entitled to equal wages, equal social rights. And my question is the following. Has the Commission, or have you drawn this lesson from the current situation? Will you be using the lesson of this situation, this crisis, in your future work? And I address this question to the Commissioner, first of all, but I am really counting on the Croatian presidency to reply as well. Thank you.
Thank you, Mr. Kosa. Now I give the floor to Gabi Bischoff on behalf of the S&D Group.
Vielen Dank. Thank you very much, Agnes. I think all of the contributions have shown how important this hearing has been, and that the European Union, I think, has to recall stronger than has been the case to date about what was set out in the Philadelphia Declaration, that work is important. We've seen what's happening with border workers. You have a right, but you cannot enjoy that right. There's nobody in that situation who can apply or have their rights applied. Now, we can see the descriptions of situations of exploitation, when it comes to seasonal workers, temporary workers, posted workers. Many have enumerated these. Also, we know that the pandemic is not responsible for that. Free movement is not responsible for that either. The pandemic is just making visible what has not been working for many years and what shows needs addressing urgently. So I think we need to draw a line here and say, okay, we cannot continue in this fashion. We need to have guidelines drawn up. That can be an initial step. But what we really need are specific measures. We need sanctions put in place for those countries whose a business model to an extent is based on these exploitative practices, because we've seen with this cascade employment, the employment and this sort of thing, everybody wants to make a profit, but nobody wants to be held responsible for what is making that profit. Hence my question, don't we need a recovery plan for fair work conditions and social protection? And what does the Commission and the ELA intend to do over and above that to make sure that we can give confidence back to these people so people understand that it's not business as usual, that Europe is pushing for better improvements?
Okay, thank you. Now, on behalf of the Renew Group, Abir Al-Shalani. You're there. Hello.
Thank you, Madam Chair. Thank you very much. According to Eurostat, only 4% of the labor force are operating in another member state than their home country. The agricultural sector plays a vital role in achieving a green transition, but given the sectors and many other dependence on functioning labor mobility, seasonal workers and cross-border workers are particularly vulnerable in times like these. We need more mobility, not less, if we are to keep the European economy competitive. Given the European Commission high ambitions for the Green Deal, how can the Green Deal and the upcoming working programmes stimulate an increased labour market mobility between member states, while at the same time contribute to reduce labour and skills shortages? Thank you.
Thank you very much. And now, after you, the floor goes to Elena Lizzi on behalf of the ID Group. Elena Lizzi. Is she there? She's there? She's there. She's there. Yeah, she is. Hello.
Hello.
I would like to bring to your attention the cross-border work in my region, Friuli, Venezia Giulia, and the limitation of the rights of our cross-border workers. Because of unilateral actions taken by Slovenia, there are sectors which include assistance to families, transportation, construction, as well as agriculture and tourism. And this has been very difficult for Italy, and specifically for Friuli, Venezia Giulia. Croatia has also prevented cross-border workers going to Italy, or also the idea of having a 2-week quarantine once somebody has entered Croatia, even though my region in northeastern Italy had a very low rate of infection. So where were you when we needed to ensure green corridors for cross-border workers? Now the damage is done. And as we say in my region, we'll just do it on our own. We even have a phrase for that in my own regional language. So I hope that in the future we can look at these priorities to give dignity and safety for these workers, their families, and the economic activity they rely on. Thank you.
Thank you very much. Can I now ask if Petra de Sutter is available for her contribution? Yes.
Thank you, Chair.
Well, I will be very short. I think the current crisis has shown the importance of the rights of cross-border frontier and seasonal workers. It has been said over and over, and I would like to use that opportunity to stress that during this crisis, Parliament has been active working on the 883 file, and I would want to ask Minister Aladrovic and Commissioner Schmit both if you could have done some efforts during this crisis to have helped to conclude this file, or should we wait for the German presidency? Commissioner Schmit, what are your views on that? And to Mr. Curel from ELA, I want to ask on the current quarantine certificates, where there has been quite some problems. Did ELA be of support to the member states? Is this problem now solved? And are there actually any written health and safety procedures available for seasonal workers? Thank you very much.
Thank you very much. I look at Madame Rafalska. Do you want to take the floor again?
Ja może tylko bardzo króciutko.
Just very shortly, in response to our letter, I read that ELO's operational capacities are very limited now. You were telling us that there are 20 staff there, and you were talking also about other limits still. And I think our hopes are really big when it comes to the functioning of this agency. So the information you are giving us raises concern, because especially in the crisis situation we are now, that is very, very concerning. Please tell us, do all the member states send the liaison officers, and when can we expect the ELA to work at a full speed? Thank you.
Okay, thank you. And then as the last speaker on my list, on behalf of the GUE, Mark Botenga.
Merci, Madame la...
Thank you, Madam Chair. Thank you, Minister. Thank you, Commissioner. I will be very swift. A lot of things have already been said. We know that this is a problem that has existed for a very long time. We've been working on it, and those who are in the field know the reality of the situation. I did just want to really underscore three things. The first is inspection. We've seen that in Germany, in other countries, that there's actually been a decrease in inspection. So the minute you start decreasing inspections, we don't know what is going on, we can't control things, and we can't enforce the rules. Now, I would like to ask the representative of the ELA, what role precisely within the very limited mandate that he has could he do in this area in inspection? Then we need better rules. Well, when it comes to digitization for those inspections, but also having a preliminary notification such that the member states can control anything that they need to. And then we have to have better social protection for all workers, and that within the context of 883 and social security coordination. And I'm so pleased to see that everyone is supporting the fact that we would actually uphold better rights for all. Also, when this would be a comment for Commissioner Schmit. I agree with you that we need convergence and we need public investment. When all is said and done, that is precisely the question at hand. We will not be able to take on social dumping unless we begin to invest more in those regions that have been completely abandoned and stranded. If you could tell us a little bit about the recovery plan that we're going to hear about more tomorrow, we would love to hear about it today. Thank you.
Okay. The interpreters gave me 3 more minutes before they end their task. So I know it's very impolite, but could the 3 guests be able to say something in 1 minute each? Or could we at least then have some procedure how to deal with all these big concerns voiced in this meeting? So first, Minister Aladrovic, sorry to be so impolite to ask you to come to me in 1 minute. Hello, hello.
Could you please press the speak button, sir?
Press the speak, yes.
Okay, sorry. I will do my best in 1 minute. So I thank you for the beginning for your all questions. As the presidency, our primary goal was to coordinate the best responses to mitigate the immediate effects of the crisis. We were talking about the coordination of social security systems. We all are aware that despite the technical complexity and the political sensitivity of this proposal, we will continue to work to find a balanced compromise. Also, the outbreak of COVID-19 and the consequent lockdown has made our efforts more difficult. Nevertheless, we have continued to cooperate constantly with all delegations of the file, and we see this as an important file, but we will need more effort from all sides to deal with it. Also about social dumping practices, I'm very sorry to hear that. So I can only urge member states to adopt EU legislation such as the Posting Workers Directive. This is our point of view as the presidency, we also hope there will be more achieved progress from that perspective. And last answer on your first question about the economy of well-being as one of our priorities. It remains one of our priorities, and we will have council conclusions on this topic in June. The pandemic has shown that flexible working conditions are applicable when they are needed, so we will discuss on this topic with ministers on the 9th of June and analyze progress from perspective of these conclusions. Thank you all.
Thank you, Mr. Minister. The Commissioner, also impolite, but do you have some kind of response in 1 minute? Mr. Schmit?
Appuyez le bouton speak, s'il vous plaît, monsieur.
Also for you, the speak button, please. It's quite difficult, isn't it?
Je vais l'actionner.
Huh? He's not there anymore?
Monsieur Schmit, je vais vous apporter assistance à distance en actionnant le bouton speak pour vous.
Yeah, okay.
I'm sorry.
No, it's okay.
So how does it come that I'm sorry. How does it come that such a fantastic freedom as a freedom of movement and the right to mobility in Europe has transformed into a nightmare for hundreds of thousands of workers who normally, as I think it was Gabi Bischoff said, have exactly the same rights as national workers? We have closed our eyes, we have ignored it, and the pandemic suddenly has opened our eyes. And Mr. Pizarro has put even some names on these dramatic situations. So I think we have really to work on that. And it's not just adopting good texts, because the texts are there. The legal situation is clear. The treaty is clear. The directives are there. But it's the problem of implementation. It's the problem of controls where finally things do not happen. Unfortunately, the Commission has no labor inspectors. The Commission has no policemen to send on the spot. It's the member states who have to take care of implementing the situation. It's the social partners who have to make sure that the texts are applied. So I mentioned the German minister has now taken initiatives to make, to apply and to implement the normal legal rights to the workers, the seasonal workers, especially in the slaughterhouses. But this applies to thousands, to hundreds of thousands of seasonal workers. I will send out now guidelines for seasonal workers. But what I sent out is the normal rights they have, and which has to be applied, which should have been applied before. But now the Commission will follow this situation. And it's not normal that European citizens are denied their rights. We are those who have to make sure that the rights of each European citizen is respected and applied. But I ask also to member states to make sure that these rights are applied, because otherwise we will not be successful. So I think this is an important issue. And I've taken this message because everybody, independently from the political group, has insisted on this. Now this is a message from Parliament, and I will take care of this issue. And I will talk to the employers, I will talk also to the trade unions, which I have already done. And I again repeat that trade unions and employers in the agricultural sector have now adopted a common declaration. Now it's time to implement it. Thank you.
Thank you, Mr. Commissioner, for your clear statement. Very welcome, and indeed, I also thought there is a lot of common ground here in the European Parliament on our concern. Should I ask if Mr. Grisel also wants to take the floor, or do we stop with the statement of the Commissioner? Yeah? Can we do that? Then my just very last responsibility here as the chair of this meeting is an announcement of the voting results on the Reform Support Programme, the opinion of Mr. Pisleroux. The final vote, we've got 37 people in favour, 12 against and 6 abstentions. The roll call vote will be circulated, of course, via the email, and I'd like to say thanks to all the members and all their assistants who helped us to push the right buttons in this voting session. Thank you very much for this meeting. Also, thank you very much to the guests. And of course, thank you very much to the interpreters who gave me 15 minutes extra. Thank you for that.